Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, training camp is 1 day away. We're going to dive into our confidence level in head coach Nick Sirianni heading into year 2, trade candidates, Howie Roseman still always looking to make moves, and our Ja'Cory Shepherd preseason MVP award candidates as we head into camp. Who are some of the guys on the bubble that could shine starting tomorrow? All that and more on another edition of your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy training camp eve, Eagles fans. What's going on? Welcome into another edition of Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, Monday through Friday. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. Today's podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered the season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Gino, happy training camp eve, my friend. It starts tomorrow at the NovaCare Complex. Football's here. We made it.
It's the big news all around the league. You're seeing clips come out. The Raiders have been there for nearly a week so far. Up in Buffalo, where you're at, they're practicing at St. John Fisher. This is the best time of year. Every team still has hope. The fans get to go out. They get to watch the 90 guys on the roster. They get to interact, get autographs. News is you're going down to the open practice.
I'm going to be at the link August 8th. That's Sunday.
Yes, sir, and I hope a lot of our fans do that as well. It's always a great experience, and what camp begins is the process to getting to the 53. OTAs are over. The calendar is truly flipped. The NFL could say what they want, that free agency is the beginning of the new calendar year. No, I believe that training camp is, because every team, they come in, they have their 90-man set, they have their expectations of where they're going to get to with the 53, and the moves that are yet to come around the NFL, it's going to be vast. I mean, there's going to be nearly half of these rosters are going to be available within a month or so.
And there will be other moves too, Gino. There's going to be trades. We've seen Howie Roseman like to make a lot of moves in the summer. I mean, in May and June after the draft, he signed 2 starters in the secondary with James Bradbury and Jaquiski Tart. Boom, nailed it. I'm 2 for 2 in the last 2 shows. But, I mean, we saw in 2017, he traded for Ronald Darby in August. So there's moves to be made. We're going to talk about potential trades he could still make coming up in segment 2. But, Gino, as you said, the 90-man roster right now is set, and we start to see everybody battle for spots and starting roles tomorrow. Nick Sirianni is going to put it all together in year 2. And that's what I wanted to start the show with you about, because I feel like a lot of this offseason, the talk has been dominated around, the pressure of Jalen Hurts to make sure this roster is elevated, and also Jonathan Gannon, because Jonathan Gannon in year 1 had a very rocky start as defensive coordinator, but we know the personnel didn't really fit what he wants to do. And it simply overall just wasn't super talented on the second and third level, at linebacker, at safety as well. It didn't fit. The pass rush, the 4-man pass rush last year wasn't great, but they brought in Hassan Reddick this year, Jordan Davis, as I said, Jaquiski Tart and James Bradbury, Nakobe Dean and Kazir White. So we know the pressure on those two, but I feel like Nick Sirianni just kind of has faded into the background, and he's the head coach, right? And he's going to really make sure that this team doesn't sink, and they do in fact swim. What is your confidence level? Because again, we both, I think, see eye to eye on Hurts and Gannon, but how are you feeling about Sirianni heading into year 2? I feel like the vibe is different with him compared to the other two.
I think the sky's the limit for Nick Sirianni, and teams and the media might put him right around the middle of the pack right now. But how I have seen him respond just as a people person, and what he did on Sundays, and formulated an impressive offense down the stretch where you talked about Gannon having a rocky start in the first half. Nick Sirianni was the same way. Throwing Jalen Hurts 40 to 50 times a game was something that they continue to do. They barely handed the ball off to Miles Sanders, where he only had 2 carries in a single game, which reminds us of that LeGarrette Blount matchup against Kansas City in the 2017 season. And then things started to turn around once they put the confidence in their backs, and they became that well-meshed, that well-oiled machine where you could pass and
It was the
throw
flower
on
comment,
a consistent
man.
basis. Yes, the flower comment was exactly
You know what
it.
we've learned as Eagles fans after seeing Doug Peterson start his career talking to the media, Nick Sirianni, what they say and how they say it. It's all about their coaching ability, Gino, on the
Yes.
field on Sundays, because Peterson and Sirianni both got laughed at by the national media. And look at how both started their careers with the success they've had.
The people person element is huge, but then to have so much expertise in the wide receiver category, I think really puts him at an advantage over other coaches that might never have been a position coach for that long. Some guys come in, they're, let's say, an offensive assistant, then they become a quality control, and then they might just go to a coordinator role, and they might not have that individualized aspect. But you saw the improvement of the Eagles wide receivers year over year, Lou, even for a guy like Quez Watkins, who you could say was probably the most improved out of that group. Well, why is that? Well, you look around, who is the guy that's there? Aaron Moorhead did a great job as well, but you see all these the Eagle Audible clips that their YouTube page puts out. You see how up close and personal he is to coaching up these guys. Even in the clip they put out from OTAs, he goes right up to AJ Brown and he's telling them about how to bend at the waist a little more so he can sink in and out of his breaks. And to have that element, I kind of look at it like a defensive backs coach. When you're a DB coach, you got to know how to see the whole field basically as a second quarterback, because you're coaching safeties. You got to know how to take angles, X, Y, Z. Think about the guys that are going against said defensive backs. It's the wide receivers. You have to be crisp in and out of your breaks. You got to know the game plan Monday through Friday. And that all stems from your coach, who allows his coordinators to do what they have to do, allows his position coaches to do what they have to do, and he entrusts all the guys around him, but he still knows what his expertise is, and that's why.
Right, and he puts his ego to the side,
yes.
There's a lot of head coaches that have that offensive mind that wouldn't have been willing to give up play calling, halfway through the season and give it to Shane Steichen, and Steichen's going to be calling plays this year as well. So to have that kind of self-awareness is huge, and as you said, have him focus more on everything that it takes to be a head coach, get into the nitty-gritty of being hands-on, especially with positions he knows the most, right? Offensively with quarterback and wide receiver. And I think the way, as you said, like 2 and 5, Sirianni, the entire team wasn't in the good graces of pretty much anybody in Philadelphia. And the way they went 7-2 down the stretch and made the playoffs, it didn't make me sold on Jalen Hurts or Jonathan Gannon, but the way they won those 7 games did show me exactly why you should be confident in Sirianni, because they won because Sirianni made this team adjust to everything they could do best versus what they wanted to do. And we know that Sirianni, the front office, the ownership, they have a long-term philosophy of what this team wants to be long-term to sustain success. But a coach, we have to remember, unlike a GM and an owner, his job is to prioritize the short term, unlike a general manager, and he did just that. So I'm confident that, of course, long term, I also want this team to look a certain way, but we know after last year that Sirianni can adjust to what he has and get the most out of his team. I mean, after that Vegas game, they seemed completely dead in the water, 3 games under 500. I know the schedule got easier down the stretch, but to get out of that hole in any way in the NFL is super impressive, especially for a team that young with a first-year head coach.
It takes leadership, and that leadership stems from the head coaching position, of course. I mean, that's just an easy thing to say, but why is that? And why was Nick Sirianni successful at that? Well, let's break it down. You mentioned one thing, the ego. He puts that to the side. Some guys Doug Peterson never wanted to give up play calling, right, Lou? That was his big thing. He always wanted to be a play caller. Well, Nick Sirianni comes in here, he's play calling, things don't go right. Says, okay, Shane Steichen, who I truly believe in, you go ahead and you could call plays. Things turned out to be successful. I know wide receivers, being Nick Sirianni. I know quarterbacks. I know how to game plan and put in formations. I'll continue to do that. I'll allow Jeff Stoutland to continue to be this ace in the hole, being the run game coordinator. And that just takes putting the ego aside and allowing yourself to do what you do well and focus on that. But the things you don't know as well, I mean, you're not going to sit there and say, the run game better than Jeff Stoutland does.
Right.
That would be pure insanity. So as an NFL coach, that puts trust in the guys around you. Then when you're in position groups and the position meetings, those coaches have the ability to be that authoritative figure. They have that ability to coach up these guys. And it's all a collaborative effort. It's not just, oh, go ask Coach Sirianni how he wants you to run that. It's like, no, Jeff will tell you how to run this. Shane will tell you what we're going to do, play 1, 2, and 3. And it's a very collaborative effort. And it's all because Nick knows himself well enough to put himself in a position to succeed.
Yeah,
and he knows his weaknesses. Sure. Yeah, self-awareness in the NFL is a huge thing. And especially coming off of Chip Kelly and Doug Peterson.
Well, the pressure, I mean, you took over for a guy that won a Super Bowl 4 years before and then made the playoffs twice in 3 years before he got fired. I mean, and then to be in that 2-5 hole and to get them out of that position, super impressive. And
which we called rock bottom for the organization in the last couple of years.
And so again, the way they won, they were beating up on a lot of bad quarterbacks, so it didn't make me all in on Jonathan Gannon. They were running a lot, so it didn't make me all in on Jalen Hurts. But for Nick Sirianni, Gino, that 7-2 finish really did show the strengths of his, head coaching ability. Again, for him, it's a short-term look. That's the job of a head coach. And, he did just that last year. For Howie Roseman, though, Gino, it is a long-term approach always. That's the job of a general manager. So coming up next, as we mentioned, the NFL, there's going to be moves made. The roster's got to get down from 90 to 53. You'll see a lot of guys cut, a lot of signings, waiver wire pickups, but there could still be trades. And we know Howie Roseman's always looking to do a deal. We're going to talk about some players on the Eagles' current roster that Roseman could potentially ship out as camp starts. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
But before we do that, we have a message from our friends over at betonline.net, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Training camp is tomorrow. This team is going to get to the 53-man roster, and we're going to see regular season games played. Well, I would go to betonline.net and hammer the Eagles over right now with how easy their schedule is. 9.5 wins. They're coming off of a 9-win season last year. There's only one place I'm putting that wager in. It's at betonline.net. You're going to hammer the Eagles over, and you're going to hammer the under on all the other NFC East teams. And you can bet on anything you want. Formula One is going on. You got golf, even esports, combat sports. If you put money on Patty the Batty this past weekend at UFC Fight Night, you can bet on boxing. You got the big Jake Paul and that fight coming up if you're into that kind of stuff. But you can bet all on it on betonline.net. They literally have anything. It's the most expansive, seamless, easiest sports book to use. I've used probably north of 20 sports books in my days, and I've stuck to BetOnline like a long-term girlfriend. I'm basically married to betonline.net at this point. Make sure you take your mobile device, go to betonline.net today, go on your laptop, go anywhere where you have internet, sign up today, and get in on the action because BetOnline is where the game starts.
All right, Eagles fans, welcome back into a Monday edition of Locked On Eagles. It's training camp eve. The Eagles report to the NovaCare Complex and start off practice in South Philly tomorrow, July 26th. Can't wait to follow all the beat reporters telling us how this team is looking. It's an exciting looking roster. I'm going to be down there at the Lincoln Financial Field on Sunday, August 8th for the opening practice. Can't wait to get down to Philly. And Gino, just overall look at such an exciting team heading into 2022. But the roster isn't done. We're at 90 right now, and there's going to be some surprise cuts. There's going to be some guys that come out of nowhere and do make this 53-man roster. There's going to be guys on the practice squad that fans say should be on the roster. Remember Paul Turner for a long time, Eagles fans were in love with. Not exactly sure why, but, there's always those guys, and we're going to get into that coming up later in the show, too, our Ja'Cory Shepherd preseason MVP award candidates. But Howie Roseman, Gino, is always looking to make moves still. And again, that could be in the form of, picking somebody up on the waiver wire that he liked in a draft class a few years ago or, whatever it is. But he's always also looking to make trades. And we saw that, a few years back when he traded, that was a big deal in August to go get Ronald Darby. That was one of your starting outside cornerbacks in a Super Bowl season. So we know he's never done looking to make deals. But instead of, because we talked about the big one right now would be if he could find a way to acquire Jesse Bates from the Cincinnati Bengals. But I want to talk more about players that he could trade away that are on this roster, because as we talked about Sirianni, his goal right now, it's all short term. But when it comes to Howie Roseman, he's got to maintain a long-term objective approach. So there's some guys on this roster that maybe they don't fit what they're going to do right now like they used to. And if they could get anything for them when it comes to draft compensation, they might consider trading them. And, I think the two one of the obvious ones is, well, I should say two of them actually are former first-round picks on offense. It's Andre Dillard and Jalen Reagor, both busts. I don't want to say Dillard's a complete bust, but he was a bust to start the NFL career in 2019 and 2020. It gave Jordan Mailata this window of opportunity to be the guy. And so now Dillard's a backup that maybe you move if a team needs a starting left tackle. And we know Jalen Reagor with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Quez Watkins taken over. Both of these guys, the path to starting spots, they're gone. So I don't know. Do you take what you can get for either one? I feel like I'm not as comfortable trading Dillard as I would be Reagor. I would take anything for at this point.
I would essentially take a 6th or 7th round pick for Jalen Reagor.
Even conditional, just get him out of here.
Andre Dillard, though, I think the bus label was there that first season where there were the questions of like, could he even anchor at that point in time? Right. Could he move from the left to the right side? But in those moments where Jordan Mailata had to move over to right tackle, Andre Dillard put out some formidable tape.
I agree.
Where you said it, if a team could use a starting left tackle, he could get you out of a pinch as a starter. And he's gotten bigger. He's improved his ability to anchor. Jeff Stoutland, he doesn't just put people's names in his mouth just to talk. He even talked up about the transformation of Andre Dillard over the past couple of years. And when Jeff talks, you have to listen. So if you're going to trade a player like that, Lou, I think the floor is a 4th round pick. I don't think you're going to take less than that because ideally on the market, offensive linemen get a lot of money. Even at his caliber of play, he's probably going to get somewhere between $8 to $10 million in the open market. They didn't pick up his options. Yeah, and then you get the comp pick. So you start with that 4th round pick.
Yeah, I don't know if I would almost prefer to keep Dillard, have one of the best backup left tackles in football. With, Jordan Mailata's gotten banged up, as has Lane Johnson throughout their careers. Have Dillard as a top tier backup this year. As you decline the 5th year option, go collect a 3rd or 4th, whatever the comp pick would be next year. That might be the better move, but you're right. I guess it depends. Like if a team's willing to offer you a 3rd round pick now, you might take that, but so I guess it depends on what the asking price would be.
That's the thing. I mean, offensive linemen don't come around that often, and especially good offensive linemen, right? And the Eagles just happen to have a collection of them.
It's just a unique situation where a 7th round pick that never played football became one of the best in football.
I mean, we were talking about Nate Herbig, who is a guy that was just a rotational player who was playing big, meaningful minutes for you last year, and you couldn't get anything for him because you just had too many spots that his agent's like, all right, we have to stop playing this game. I'd like my client to go somewhere else where he could start. And I don't believe they're going to do that in a guy like Andre Dillard, who still has his rookie deal. And if a team's going to pay a player like that, give up that pick right now. I mean, they're not going to just cut this guy. He's going to be on the roster. Not to mention they have LaRaven Clark there, who's one of the better swing tackles in football, who has fresh legs because he hasn't seen the field in literally 2 seasons. Yeah. So they have options there. But Jalen Reagor, if I was going to bet it, was for sure the more likely candidate. I would say that if you were going to move guys, I would say Andre Dillard is one. You could also throw in the guy who he would probably be protecting in those second string minutes in Gardner Minshew. I threw this into the equation the other day. If a team needs a guy and throws you a 3rd round pick and you have seen enough in Carson Strong to believe
it'd be interesting to see what Strong does in the summer.
That's the biggest equation. You're not going to go in there with Jalen and Strong being your 1 and 2 if Carson just can't do anything, and you would probably sign another veteran. But we saw the Sam Bradford deal 8 days before the season began in 2016, Lou. Quarterback situations are an ever-evolving door. And if there's another Teddy Bridgewater situation that goes down, let's say Jameis Winston goes down for the Saints, maybe. I mean, let's say Baker Mayfield in Carolina, and they just want to have another guy in that rotation at quarterback, or let's say the Deshaun Watson situation in Cleveland, Lou. Let's say they can't get a guy like Jimmy G. Maybe Gardner Minshew's that option for them. And you could definitely get a 3rd for Gardner Minshew. I think the Teddy Bridgewater deal, not in 2016, but when he went to the Saints and the Saints gave up a 3rd round pick to get him, that's a very similar situation I could see for Gardner because he's the best backup in football right now, without a doubt. If a team wants to compete and they have a roster that they believe can go and compete with a good defense and solid playmakers, who other than Gardner Minshew, and all for the cost of a 3rd round pick, I think they could walk away from this window if they were to get the most of what we expect with multiple day 2 picks and potentially a couple day 3 picks because they have high quality assets that garner a lot in that market. You're not just going to undersell them just because. You're going to get fair market value, if not more, because Howie Roseman is the guy doing the deal.
And then, Gino, you look on defense when it comes to some potential trade candidates. I think the one interesting one on the defensive line, and we've mentioned this a couple of times before on the show when we talk about, the depth of the defensive tackle group, it's Javon Hargrave, which is strange because normally you don't trade away a guy still in his prime, coming off a career year, had, he was one of the best outside of Aaron Donald, one of the most efficient interior pass rushers in the NFL last year. But when you look at the scheme change this year, you look at the pick of Jordan Davis, you look at the potential emergence of Milton Williams in year 2, and how I still think Fletcher Cox in a rotation of like him, Davis, and Williams can still be very effective. And they're going to, although they're going to do a lot more odd fronts, as we talked about last show, they're going to rotate things around and still use everybody to their strengths. And you see the contract extension that could come soon for Hargrave and what he could command on the open market. I wonder, and I know they would love to have to be 4 deep inside. And that's why I don't think maybe they would consider trading Dillard right now, or even like Isaac Seumalo or whoever loses the right guard battle to start camp. But Hargrave too, they love depth up front. But with that contract, with the scheme change, with the young depth, and you don't want to take away snaps from Davis and Williams with both Cox and Hargrave, I don't know. And I think you could get more, Gino, for Hargrave than Cox if you're going to trade one of those 2 veterans. I think he's a name to monitor for sure. I don't think it's likely, but he's somebody you could get the most for, maybe all of these guys you mentioned.
You mentioned the change in scheme fit when talking about Javon Hargrave. When he was in Pittsburgh, he played a lot of this odd style front. So his versatility opens up his trade value. Because if you're looking for a guy that is going to help you on the interior and you're one of these multiple style front teams like the Eagles are, I would rather have Javon Hargrave being younger, more versatile than a guy like Fletcher Cox if I'm in a personnel department.
I agree.
Just in inquiring that player, and you're going to probably have to end up paying him, extending him for a couple years. Like you said, Fletcher Cox most likely will want to be a lifer in Philadelphia. It makes a ton of sense. And I could even see, Lou, you mentioned the interior, Derek Barnett. Like, could they not move him realistically?
They shouldn't have re-signed him to begin with.
Yeah, they shouldn't have.
Especially if Teron Jackson is looking good in camp. Yeah.
Teron Jackson's more athletic.
And Milton Williams' ability to play on the edge, too. I don't think you need Derek Barnett. I don't love that they brought him back.
Take a bag of used footballs for Derek Barnett.
He's just not going to be worth it. I guarantee you he's going to have more penalties this year than sacks. I would hammer that bet.
That's a near guarantee. And the thing is, teams always need defensive line help, and I'm sure there's a team that would take a flyer on a guy like Derek Barnett. There has to be. But if you were putting odds on it, I would say maybe not even a player that you mentioned. Let's say TJ Edwards or Davian Taylor. Let's say they lose out on the linebacker battle, and they're both third-year guys, right? And they have film out there that could garner them interest from another team. Mm-hmm. If Kaiser White is that good and you believe that you could pay him and Nakobe Dean truly is the future, well, where do these guys fit in? Because your special teams player is Sean Bradley. That's your third guy at the linebacker position. He's your ace on special teams. He's not going anywhere. Fingers crossed.
Right.
But then the other 2 guys, Davian has been banged up. TJ Edwards is more of a rundown guy. Do you want the versatility on the field? I personally do. There's a lot of optionality going into this window.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. They're deep.
Movement for sure.
Yeah, they're deep, and there's some guys that maybe don't fit like they used to that Howie Roseman could get a pick for. We'll continue to monitor it throughout August. Moves always happen across the NFL, especially when Howie Roseman's your general manager. But when it comes to the roster right now, guys that are fighting to make this roster the 53 as we head in with 90 starting tomorrow at camp, I want to get into the awards that you created a few years ago right here on Locked On Eagles, the Ja'Cory Shepherd preseason MVP award. Who are some of the biggest candidates to shine in camp this year that maybe really came out of nowhere? I shouldn't say nowhere, but, low-end draft picks, undrafted rookies, just camp bodies that could shine. we've seen a lot of those guys that Eagles fans have fallen in love with over the past few years. We'll get into those candidates coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. But guys, first, a shout out to one of our sponsors of today's show, and it's Dave. Level with me here. We've all been in a situation at some point in our lives when we were a little tight on cash and maybe you could only afford to put a few gallons of gas in your tank, or look, you got another save the date and you're wondering how you're going to afford a gift. That's where Dave can come in and help. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses do come up. Now Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Hindsight is 20/20 and you can't change the past, but what if you could get a little help from future you? Maybe you'd ask for a little cash. Now you can with Dave. It's the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if, again, you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download the Dave app today and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's Dave, D-A-V-E. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Future you is going to thank you because of Dave. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back into this Monday edition of Locked On Eagles. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. And Gino, I'm excited about this final segment. This is your award that you created a few years ago. So why don't you explain the Ja'Cory Shepherd preseason MVP award?
So somebody like myself, I have always been the nerd for sports. All my friends say, how do you know XYZ about said sport? And one of those things is following long training camps and knowing all of these guys on the 90-man roster. So back in 2015, Ja'Cory Shepherd is a Philadelphia Eagle, right? And we're all saying, oh, man, this guy is going to come in here. He's going to be a star. Like, he's shutting down everybody in preseason. I'm going on a hike. I get a text message. Darren Sproles essentially ends Ja'Cory Shepherd's career by tearing his ACL on an option route. And Ja'Cory Shepherd never got to see the graces of an NFL field as a full-time starter. And this evolved into the Ja'Cory Shepherd preseason MVP award because everybody thought this guy was going to be a true 53-man roster, maybe even a starter in the slot. And he turned into nothing more than a preseason MVP, which guys like Paul Turner, which Eagles fans know very well, or a player in Kareem Mostert, who I loved for the longest time. We settled on Ja'Cory Shepherd.
I love all these names.
They're great. They're great.
A lot of random cab names now going through my head. I just thought of Ifeanyi Moma, Carlton Agudosi.
Aguidosi's catching passes up in Winnipeg, my friend. He's actually
really
doing pretty good. I saw him playing the other day. Yes, sir. So that's what this award is, and it helps their fans get involved and know some of these guys on the rosters. Deshaun Hall was our inaugural winner back in 2019.
That's right.
Massive preseason 2020's COVID year, and then Quez Watkins goes through the moon in preseason.
And he ended up becoming a starter and being
a starter.
That's rare when you see the camp guy like a Paul Turner not only make the roster, but then become a legit player as a starter. It's rarely happened, but it definitely can. And with the Eagles, we've seen that. With all the injuries they had from 2017 to 2020, I think, Eagles fans especially do see the value in these guys. It is funny, though, when you see fans like start to fall in love with a Rashid Bailey, you know what I mean? Or Damaris Johnson, remember back in the early 2010s, or Chad Hall, who is now the Bills wide receiver coach.
Yes.
So, Gino, there's some candidates. I think we agree that maybe the big one right now is undrafted rookie receiver from Utah, Britton Covey, right? It sounds like
100%.
Tim McManus from ESPN actually reported today. It sounds like the Eagles front office is very high on Covey and think he could be the answer when it comes to the return game and could be the guy that makes this team on the bubble as that sixth receiver, maybe beating out someone like Jalen Reagor and or Greg Ward because of his value on special teams. He broke records at Utah when it comes to his return ability, and the Eagles need that.
In the biggest way. And when you look at those last spots on the roster and why these guys can become a preseason MVP is because they're going to do a lot of the little things well that don't really show up on the stat sheet on Sunday. They're going to be special teams players. They're going to be guys that are your fifth and sixth receivers that'll probably be sitting on the sideline, helping your quarterback warm up, just keep his arm fresh. And a guy like Britton Covey, you talk about his instant impact and what he can do in the return game. And essentially be a instant starter for this team. And him and I think Devin Allen could be the two guys. And Devin Allen is already making a strong case for how well he's run in the World Championships. Eagles Twitter is all over this guy and how electric he could be. But the limited amount of value we have seen at that position, Lou, puts that at the forefront of my mind, saying that if we even see a little increase in value out of these guys, they make a strong case to be the Ja'Cory Shepherd 2022 winners.
I agree. I think on defense, Ja'Cory Shepherd was a corner, right? Mm-hmm. So I think a corner candidate. Tagowan, I think.
Agreed.
Tagowan. Here's another name that we get. It is Gowan. Okay, cool.
Mm.
I think, of all of those young corners that the Eagles kind of took a flyer on the last few years to round out their depth chart, I think he is the most physically gifted with the length, speed, the change in direction. The Eagles really did like him in the 2021 NFL draft, I believe it was. Yep. And they definitely made an emphasis during that Zach Ertz trade with Arizona last year on making sure Gowan was a part of that package. I feel like all of those young corners that are on this roster, maybe outside of Zach McPherson, like the undrafted kids or the guys who took flyers on with, small trades like Kerry Vincent Jr. as well. I think Gowan might be the guy that turns head the most of all those guys.
Yeah, I mean, you even have Mario Goodrich. I mean, you have Josh Jobe.
I'm curious to see how they use Jobe, if it's going to be more at corner or safety, because I know he could do both, and maybe he was projected more as a safety at this level. It'll be interesting.
I think both of those guys, Goodrich and Jobe, can really do both of that intermixing there. Same with Kerry Vincent. I'm pretty sure he was listed as a safety when he first came in. Now he's listed as a cornerback.
Which is good with the unknowns at safety, man. It's good to have versatility in the defensive backfield.
I believe the winner of this award will be a defensive back player. I think it'll be one of those younger guys. You could see a guy like Tagowan or maybe even Kerry Vincent show up in preseason game 2 with the big interception, and our fans start to fall in love with him then. But ultimately, what I want to see and why I love this little award, it's because those guys don't get the recognition. A guy like Deshaun Hall, he might not even play in the regular season, right? But these guys are fighting for jobs. They're fighting for jobs that every single player who's ever picked a football up has aspired to get to. And I want to show them some recognition. Ja'Cory Shepherd, you might have never even heard of him as an Eagles fan. You might be new to the show. But to Lou and I, for a small portion of time, he brought some joy to our life. And I want to give the guys credit. I like to give all of these guys that might not be the big A.J. Brown, the Jalen Hurts types of names, give them their well-respected credit that they deserve in the preseason, because they got to go out there and play in the games that not everybody's watching on their TVs. They're on weird times on Thursday and Friday nights. Not everybody's going to be available to watch them. But guys like us, we love this time of year, and we're excited to keep you covered all through camp, my friend.
Eagles training camp begins at NovaCare Complex tomorrow afternoon. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Eagles. We got a show for you recapping everything at practice and more each and every day on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well in video form. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you follow us on Twitter, Talking Birds, all throughout the day at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We'll see you for Tuesday's show. Until then, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.